Welcome csc121 to ex24. This is going to be student data, and we're going to use this with statement, and you could get this from the How to Think Like a Computer Scientist area. They have a section about with statements that are a little before this. Here's with statements, and you could copy them from down here, and you could just say with open, and I'll copy this and change it, I guess. And what you can also do is go to coursework and go to student data. We're going to have student data, then we're going to have student grades. So I'll go to student data. You're going to fork it and make it your own. And I'll just change the name here and put a V. And I'm going to paste in that stuff I just copied. This with open stuff. It says with open, except I'm going to use student data.text. So I'll make sure I put in student data. And I'll just call it SD. That'll be easier to use. And I'm not sure what I want to do here yet. And let me get this stuff out of here so I could read this. Here's the instructions. I forgot to tell you that I have the instructions right in front, so let me put these in front. And it says, using the text file, write a program that prints out the names of students that have more than 6 quiz scores. All right, so here's with open here. Now, everything you do, just be aware, everything you do has to be indented in here. So when you get to here, everything has to be indented. So whatever you type here, even for loops, everything has to be indented here, even if you write to another file. So what we're going to do here is say for I in, well, let's think what we have to do. We have to cycle through these things here. There's Joe, Bill, Sue, Grace, and John. We have to cycle through and get their length. Now remember, to get their length, what we want to do is we want to probably split them, because that's what we've been doing before. Then we could get a length of them, kind of like a list. And that's what we'll try to do first. So let's split them first. So we'll say, like we did before, for line in, and it's SD. That's our variable now. So we'll say for line in SD. And we don't have to put a close with this one. So that's the nice thing. For line in SD. So for each line, we'll convert it. So we'll say, we'll make a new thing. We'll call them students or something. I'll just call it students right now. Students equals, and you could just print them out, but I'll just do students equals, and I'll do line dot split. And then after I do that, so I'm making a new variable here that represents that kind of list, and then I'll put an if statement, because remember, we want to find students have more than 6 quiz scores, so that's usually an if statement. So I'll do if len of students is greater than 6. Now remember, if one of them is going to be the name, if you look here, they have a name, so we have to almost subtract the name. So whatever it says, go less than 1. We could do that. You know, or you can actually you could do something like this. If length of students, another thing you could do is you could put in the thing here and say in the square brackets and say 1. That means the length of students 1 and on. So that'll skip off the first one. That'll kind of break off the name. If you could say, and if you do that and say greater than 6, then you could just say print. I guess we'll do print line. We'll see what happens here. Or if we have to do print students. I'm not sure. Try it out. There it is. That's it. We're just printing the line that's has the length of students more than that. So that's all we did for that. So that worked out okay. And I don't think we have to write it to a new file or anything. I don't think I said to write it to a new file, or at least from our instructions in here. Write a program that prints out the names of students that have more than 6 quiz scores. So if I changed it to 4, I'd get a couple more people there. If I made it 5, all right, I get Sue and Grace. So that's it. So that one was pretty easy. So let's do, I'll even keep this open in case I need to. And I'll go back here to coursework, and let's do 25 right away. I'll click on this, and I'll fork it. This is student grades. This one's a little more challenging because we have to get the average. Now that I forked it, I'll change this to V. So this is 25 now. And I'll go back here, and I'm going to copy this just in case I need it. Now let's check out what student grades is. And here we have Archie, Veronica, Betty, Josie, and Jughead. And they all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They all have 5 grades. So that'll make it easier to average. So what we'll do here is we'll kind of do the same thing. We'll have to split them for each line, and what we'll do here is we'll actually put another thing inside here. we're going to say with open, and we're going to actually just copy this whole thing. Actually, this one's going to be student averages. So we'll just say student average because that's going to be the new one. This one will be student grades because it's the one we have here. This one has to match up there. So that's going to be student grades. So we're opening that as student grades, and then this one's going to be student averages. And so we're going to have to indent any of this over. I'll just hit tab. I'm not sure what we're going to do yet. We have to figure this out first. So we're opening up student grades, and then eventually, instead of printing a line, we're going to actually write a new file. So this says SD. This is going to be G. So for each line in SG, we're going to split it, and each one's going to be a list then. And what we're going to need to do is just find the sum of the list, except, see, this would be fine if we could just do this. If we could, and I'll just leave it like this. If we could just say, remember if we did this, we did sum t equals, and it would be len of, think about this, we're going to take the length of the list of students, and it would be the length of the list from 1 to whatever. Wouldn't matter how many they have. So we need sum t, wait, this would be num t, I'm sorry. This would be num t. The number would be the length of how many tests we have, number of tests, just like we did our other one. And then we need to know the sum. So we'll do sum t, and that would basically be, there's a sum that we could do of students, the same thing, of one like that. And then we could say average equals sum t divided by num t. So that would seem to work fine. And then we could just print out average. Actually, average wouldn't be, we could just print out average. And we'd want their name, so you'd want to put their name next to it or something. So you'd do something like students 0, comma, and then average, comma, and you could do a %, something like that. And that should work. That seems like it would work. You'd go through there, and let's see what happens. You get a thing here, invalid syntax. It doesn't like that. Oh, because that's a string, but I don't think that's our problem. Let's run it again. Student average.text. Here's something else. When we open this, this is going to be the read, and when we open this, this is going to be the write. So we need that, so that's why that came up here. It wasn't able to write to a file. It says it doesn't exist, so that should fix that, but that's not going to fix all our problems. But I forgot that initially, so now we have that, and let's run it. And this is the real problem we're going to run into. It won't let us add up all the numbers. It'll let us get the length. If we print out length or something, it would let us do that. But it's going to treat the sum. It's not going to sum up everything from one there, because when it makes it a list, even though there's numbers in there, it treats them as strings. So it doesn't treat them as integers that we can actually add up. All right, so what we're going to need to do is actually convert our list to integers. Now, what we can try and do is just create a new list here, and I'll call it grades. And I'll make a variable grades, and it's actually going to be students from 1 up, because it'll just be the numbers. Now, we already know that that's not going to fix our problem, but that's what we want in our list. So we'll put that in there. We don't need to put an endpoint there. And then this thing will actually be grades, and then this thing will be grades, and it won't need this list in here. We won't need any index number in here because we're making a new one. Now, what would be perfect, again, is if we could just do this. If we could just say int and wrap this whole thing in an int, and they could all be ints. Except it won't do that. I could run it. It's not going to work. We're still going to get a problem with doing that. It can't take an entire list and just make everything in it be integers. What we have to do is do it individually. So what we're going to do is do it individually. So we're going to do a for loop. We're going to say for I in, and it's actually going to be in range. It's going to be in range of the length of grades. So we're going to have to cycle through that length. So it's going to have to cycle through that many times. So how many grades there are, it's going to have to cycle through there. So for whatever that length is, since we don't know. So we're going to say for I in length of grades, and I think we need our closing parentheses there because we're using range. And then I'll hit a return here, and we have something here indented. That's just because we didn't indent here yet. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say grades I. So this will go through each one. So we're going to have grades I equals int of grades I. And what that'll do is it'll actually convert each element in the list individually by cycling through it to an integer. So each index number in that list is now going to be an integer. So that's the only way to do it. We can't just do it in one shot like that. So I'm going to take this off of here. You don't want that. You just want that. So we're still going to have this variable is going to be that, and then we're going to use the length of grades to cycle through and convert everything to that. And then once we have grades, because we have grades, then once that's been converted down here to where there are integers in there, then we can do the length of grades, the sum of the grades, and do the math for that. So let's see what happens with this. Let's see if it prints out. And it does. It prints out here, and that's actually okay. We're going to have a problem, though, when we don't print this. And that only matters because we're going to write to a file. Now, we're going to write to the student average file. And actually, we're going to write over this. There shouldn't be anything here right now. It's just because I'm doing this a second time because my video stopped. But there shouldn't be anything in here. So let me just wipe this out for now. And I'll go back to here, and I'll run it again. And you can see it's not going to write anything to here because we don't have any comment to write. It should only write here on our page. And that's all we want right now. And that's fine. Now, to write this, because we have this student average, we could just do, and that's actually what we want down here. This is fine. We can actually just do sa.write, and we'll write this and see how this works. See if this writes it to the page. So we're going to hit run, and we get a thing with arguments here. It's looking at these as arguments because they're inside a function. It doesn't like this comma formatting in here, so what we're going to have to do is just make it an F string. So we'll just do F, put quotes on either end, and get rid of the quotes inside wherever we have them. And then it's going to be students 0, average. We'll get rid of the commas in here. And then we'll put any variables inside of curly brackets. And we'll put average in curly brackets because that's the way variables work with F strings. And then we'll actually bump this % right next to it. So that should work. So let's see what happens. And we see nothing here. That's good. And if we go to student average, it actually wrote it to the page. That's actually what we want. One little thing, we just have to put new line characters in there, or line breaks. And we could put those right in here. We could put after each one, right before the quote, we could just do backspace N. And then when we run it again, it's going to rewrite over that file. And there it is. And that's what it's supposed to look like. So that's it. That's EX25. We just had this little extra thing. We had to do this part in here. This was a little bit of an issue because we had to convert our individual items inside our list to integers. So we just kind of made a special variable. After it became a list, we made a new variable that just took the second element, or element 1, to the end, and made that a new list. And then we cycled through that list, and we converted all the elements to integers by using this method with the for loop. And we just had to do it in a range of length of grades. Sometimes you can make a variable that represents the length of grades. Then we just do the math. We just divide by the 2, and we just needed an F string to actually write it to a file. It didn't like using a function and having those commas in there, even though for some reason print, it doesn't mind it when you just use the print function. So that's all you need for that. So you can just share that to EX25 in your coursework, and that's it. Those are all 4 of those. Those were 2 of those right here. I know they're not the most fun things to be working on, and they're a little complicated in places. But hopefully you'll learn something from working on them, and you have these as references as well.